and boom goes the dynamite.
Hello, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. It is February 14th. Happy Love Day. I hope you guys are all having a much better start to your week than us bitter Eagles fans and enjoying all the happiness, all the love, all the fun. I am Renee Washington, joined by producer Mike, bitter Renee Washington, and I was very hesitant to wear red today because I feel like I should not wear red for about 57 days in honor of the disappointing loss. And if you can't tell, I'm still very bitter. So that being said, let's talk lacrosse. Let's talk about all that's happening in the NLL with an exciting weekend of games that we saw. And as always, as we get into our top story presented by the Daily Dive store, be sure to check out the Daily Dive store, not just in the link in our bio, but you can also scan the QR code that is on your screen. Nice and easy. We love to see technology simplifying things for us, producer Mike. Let's get into our top story. We've got a lot today. In honor of Valentine's Day, we've got Ryan Ballantine joining the show later as well as we talk about Calgary sweeping the weekend. But first and foremost, let's begin with the Mammoth losing Joey Capito for the season. This is a big one. The transition player who's been with Colorado since he joined the NLL back in 2012. In his sixth season, has had 90-plus loose balls he's collected, a career playoff high, 7 points last year during their championship run, and the Mammoth are now without Joey Capito for the remainder of the season. What were the initial thoughts when you saw this and realized what this means for the Mammoth, Mike?
Oh, you do wonder. I mean, it'd be one thing if this was just a normal transition player who was expendable, but a guy who's been there for 10 plus years, it's like your core. It's like it hits you right here in the heart. And I do wonder, I don't know how much it's going to affect them, like in that sense, but I feel like it's going to affect them a little bit more than you think it will, because that's a big name to lose. It's not just a guy who you can just, like I said, plug and play. It's like he's been there, he knows what he's doing. Now you have to coach somebody else up, and maybe obviously he'll be doing coaching too, but tough injury, tough.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you don't know the direct impact it'll have on results, but I do imagine a player like Joey, with being on this team his entire NLL career, being a veteran, being a leader, being one of the consistent cogs in the wheel, in terms of leadership and the voice, the consistency that you may lose out on that with him out for the remainder of the season with an injury. And in addition to the injury, the Mammoth also were involved in a trade, trading Mike Burke to the Riptide. And so the 6'1", 175-pound forward is headed to New York at 32 years old. He's got 5 assists, 15 loose balls in his 7 games he played this season. And the Riptide will actually mark his 6th team. I'm sure he's hoping this is not going to lead to number 7. 6th team in 7 seasons. So we were just talking about Joey Capito, who's been with the Mammoth for 10 plus years. Well, Mike Burke in 7 seasons has been with 6 different teams and now headed to the Riptide. Do you think this will have an impact, especially looking at the Riptide coming off of a win this past weekend? Is this a much needed trade to bring in another attacker and also a veteran in Mike Burke?
It is a nice move because, like you said, it's a veteran, and when you get rid of Callum Crawford, of course, he's scoring 5 goals every game, it seemed like, in Dallas for Panther City, for the Pests, that is. But I do wonder if he's going to have an advanced role in this Riptide team, because Jeff Teat has been taking off the last few games now without Callum Crawford. And like you said, it's a veteran presence, nothing huge, but definitely worthy of noting that the trade did break. And guess who? Daily Dive broke the trade. Let's go.
Daily Dive, we're always bringing you the latest and the most recent updates across the NLL especially. And as we look at teams looking to finish out their rosters and make some moves, it's not always just about the guys that have all the stats and the numbers. Now, of course, with a player like Mike Burke, as we mentioned, at 32 years old, he does bring something a little bit different, more than just what stats will show. And for the Riptide, with having a young superstar in Jeff Teat, to now have another veteran that you add to the offense, can definitely help out, especially with the amount of attention Jeff Teat has been receiving. Well, let's stick with the Riptides. They upset Albany 14-12 this past weekend. I know I had picked Albany to win that one, but the Riptide win. Jeff Teat finishes with 7 goals, 2 assists. Steve Orlebin, 55 saves, and the Riptide are back in the win column. Albany in a game where we've been talking about needing to win to show they're not in that struggle bus category, but with the Walkers, for those of you that missed our last Metaphors Friday. But they proved they're still in the struggle bus. But the New York Riptide show up and get a much-needed victory, Mike.
Yeah, so what is this, like 2 out of 3 now for the Riptide? And which is good because Jeff Teat needed to step up, and he did. 55 saves. I believe like last week we had a 54. This week we had a 55. So 3 stars. Got to go to one of those guys, Jeff Teat or Steve Orlebin. Who knows? You guys will shortly. As for the Albany Firewolves, boy, I went 6-0 on my picks, by the way, straight up. And I was concerned, like you said, Albany was going to start getting on the struggle bus because Georgia Swarm are 0-6. They're lucky they didn't make the show. We have an awesome guest instead. But Albany might be right there front, like in the first row behind them. They were, like I said, they started so well in the first 2 or 3 games, and you can't lose this game, man. Riptide are not supposed to be in this. They're not only supposed to get in because of Jeff Teat. And so you let Jeff Teat score, you lose. That's what happens.
Yeah. I blame you, Mike, because you reminded me that you went 6-0 and then proceeded to hit me with a go Chiefs and then proceeded to go 7-0 technically because you were correct on every pick for this weekend and you did not have to be. Okay. So I'm going to blame you. But look, as you mentioned, in all seriousness, the Georgia Swarm are still driving the struggle bus. We're not going to talk about them today. Instead, we're going to talk about a team that was completely phenomenal this past weekend and sweeping their doubleheader weekend in the Calgary Roughnecks. But Albany definitely showing they are right there on the bus, front row, and a team that's no longer in the losing column has ended their 2-game losing streak back in the win column, the Rochester Knighthawks. They knock off the Thunderbirds 16-14. Connor Fields finished with 8 points in that game. Our Daily Dive former guest Holden Catoni finished with 7 points as they led the Nighthawks back to a victory. I knew that they were going to get back in the win column. I was predicting next weekend, but apparently it was this past weekend. So a lot of excitement this past weekend that happened, including Calgary sweeping the weekend. We've hinted at it. It's time to bring in Roughnecks analyst Ryan Ballantine, who will be joining us in just a few moments to talk about all that happened in both of their wins this past weekend. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Daily Dive, our big guest of the episode presented by Fanatics. You can check out the link in our social media bio. And as always, be sure to check out all the great NLL merchandise and gear that is at Fanatics. Well, we've talked about some teams that are still on the struggle bus this past weekend, but one team that's living on cloud 9 right now after sweeping both of their games, Calgary Roughnecks. With that, let's welcome in Roughnecks analyst with the fantastic beard game always, Ryan Ballantine. Welcome.
I'm glad to be back and good to be here after a weekend. There was something happening on Sunday. I'm not sure what it was, but the weekend was really capped for the Roughnecks with wins on Friday and Saturday. Yeah,
let's just imagine the weekend stopped Saturday after the Roughnecks. There was nothing on Sunday. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not crying. You are. The Roughnecks did something that's been very tough for everybody. In a 2-game weekend, they won both. And they won both games against 2 top teams in Saskatchewan, which is, as we know, a big rivalry game, as well as knocking off defending champs Colorado. So starting the Friday night game, as they defeated the Rush in what was supposed to be a really intense, close battle, and Calgary showed up and showed out. Very, very dominant victory there. What did you notice in that first game Friday night that you think stood out about what made Calgary successful in that victory?
Well, I think the difference in the second half was the transition game. In the first half, the Rush were able to get off the bench and get the stop and get their defensive players in to prevent the very dangerous Roughnecks transition crew from going off the way they did. In the second half, that just didn't happen, and the Roughnecks come out and scored, I think, 5 quick ones. None of the scoreboards were working inside the stadium on Saturday, so you never knew what the score was. You never knew when penalties were ending or anything like that. So it was a little difficult to be in-house watching the game. But they scored 5 quick goals to take a lead, and they just never really looked back. Christian Del Bianco shut down the Rush offense and did everything he needed to do in the net. And the Roughnecks just dominated that second half. The first half, I mean, it ended at the half 3-3. And by the end of the game, it was certainly a different story there as the Roughnecks beat up on the Rush.
Yes, it was. And at first, you kind of expected it to start off tight. I expected it to be a close game the entire game. But as you mentioned, Calgary just woke up in the second half, made much needed adjustments, and it paid off. And then that momentum continues. They get a short rest. They're back on the field 24 hours later, not even. And they are now facing defending champs in the Colorado Mammoth. And after a short rest, they come right out, pick up where they left off, and sweep the weekend. What do you think helped them be able to knock off Colorado with such a quick turnaround?
Well, actually, I think it's very interesting within the NLL that back-to-back weekends, typically if a team can win the first one, they're pretty good at getting the second one. And I think it's because of chemistry, right? These guys do travel in for games on weekends from their various and sunder. They don't practice together all week. They get 1 or 2 practices in, and the more chemistry you can build, the more effective you're going to be. So with the second half with the Roughnecks, I've found, especially over the years, that second game, if they can win the first one, they're going to sweep the second one because you've got a very great opportunity to build on the success of the night before. Now, against the Mammoth, unlike the game against Saskatchewan, where they did a lot of their damage in transition, this one was the first time that we've really seen the Calgary offense break out from a 5-on-5 standpoint. They didn't really rely on a lot of goals from the transition. They just victimized Dylan Ward and eventually, got a couple to get some breathing room on Tyler Carlson, but they scored. I think it was 11 goals in the first half. It was 11-2 at half. And after that, they just kind of gripped the sticks the rest of the way and got through the weekend.
Absolutely. Putting up 13 in each game and holding both teams under 10 goals, single digits. 2 very good, strong opponents in that. This was no easy weekend. And the Roughnecks, in my opinion, with both wins, very convincing victories for them. And now looking through the start of their season, you have to wonder we'll start on the player side, who you feel has been the MVP of the team so far. There's a lot of different players that have stepped up in big moments, but who do you think stands out as the guy that's been most consistent as the team's MVP so far?
Well, I think if you look at the team, their success is predicated completely and totally on whether or not Christian Del Bianco is having a good night. If he's having a good night and sometimes a great night, as he had against Saskatchewan, I don't know that the Roughnecks are beatable. Honestly, I think if Del Bianco is 100% on his game on that night, the Roughnecks just are going to beat most teams. They've every time they've scored, with the exception of one game, if they've scored 11 goals, they've been victorious. And that's not a number that you really need to poke on in lacrosse. They're 6-1 with 11 goals. And so that's something that you can look at and say, okay, well, that's what we need to get to. The transition game's been getting there with Courier and Simpson having 10 goals for himself. Courier has 9. And then, on the offensive side of things, they're starting to find that chemistry. This is a young offense, newly together, and they're putting it together and starting to find the back of the net. So, I think when you look at the West Division of the NLL, The Roughnecks are the 1 in the Seals 7-1 record, 6-1 record. So it's fully possible that they could come out of the West Division, and they kind of made a statement this weekend to indicate that they're not they're in a different tier from those other 4-win teams that we all had on Friday.
Yeah, as you mentioned, on the heels of the San Diego Seals, who are sitting at 6-1, as Calgary is now 6-3 on the season. I love that stat about when they score 11 goals or more, they're 6-1 on the season, which does say a lot about their defense and definitely the play of Christian Del Bianco, that they're able to hold it down because, as you mentioned, that's not a lot of goals. And, we've seen teams put up 18 goals, 16 goals. It's not a lot, but being able to get the job done defensively consistently is key. Now, as you talk about through their 6-3 start and being able to separate themselves to the rest of the pack, another way they separate themselves, as we were just seeing the numbers of attendance, Calgary is an exciting team to watch. You look at the number of people that attended. Obviously, it's a huge rivalry game against Saskatchewan. And I imagine it was a great mix of Rush and Roughnecks fans in attendance. But you were there, so you can give us more insight. Just over 14,000 in attendance. We've been talking about attendance numbers on the show pretty regularly and how they need to be higher. But this was a game that not only had a great game for the Roughnecks, not the Rush, but also had the fans in the seats as well. So thoughts on how the team and also their fans are really supporting them and continuing to be that additional X factor, for them for home games at least.
Well, the organization made a smart move. I think they, they're owned by the Calgary Sports and Entertainment Corporation, as we know, who also own the CFL's Calgary Stampeders, the NHL's Calgary Flames, and Wranglers and Hitmen in minor hockey. So what CSEC did here was Stampeder season ticket holders were offered free tickets to the Rush game. If you're a Stampeder season ticket holder, you get to come to this Calgary versus Saskatchewan game for free. And there were a lot of people, I think, that utilized those free tickets to bring a friend or something, because those are a healthy crossover audience between those two sports, because they play at disparate times. So it's nice you can have season tickets year round. But still, 14,000 is a great number. I mean, that's almost the 2 lower bowls in Calgary completely full. And if the Roughnecks can get that kind of number, that's spectacular. The idea that they were able to pull 25,000 over 2 back-to-back nights, I think, is the most impressive thing. It's one thing to play a back-to-back when you're on the road one and you're at home one. To have 25,000 fans commit to coming out on Friday and Saturday, and most season ticket holders were there both nights, I think that is a really good news for the franchise. As they continue to kind of compete for those attendance records with the Colorados of the league.
Yeah, that is a great point. The numbers don't lie. It's fantastic to see consistently that they're able to bring fans out, and even having some other initiatives and some different promos and things that are encouraging people to come, because as we know, once you watch one game, you're hooked, but we got to get you in the arena to see it live, to be able to, really appreciate it even that much more versus just watching on TV. Well, unfortunately, they are not going to be home this upcoming weekend, but still an exciting game, another chance to get a win as they are facing off against Vancouver Friday. What are your thoughts heading into this game for what Calgary has to do? Now, you had 2 convincing wins this past weekend, and this could be what some consider a trap game in that sense. For the Warriors, who are struggling, sitting at the bottom of the standings, still chasing another victory, looking to get victory number 2 on the season. What do you think the Roughnecks are going to have to do to continue the winning streak this upcoming weekend?
I think if the Roughnecks show up, that might be enough. They can't leave their game behind. Vancouver is a team that is capable of an upset, but I mean they're trading away assets. Vancouver is in a rough place, and medal of honor to those Vancouver fans that continue to show up, because year after year after year after year, they get the same results. And yet the fans continue to go to the building and support the team. So kudos to them. But I think right now, Vancouver and Calgary are not on the same level. If Calgary just comes out and plays the game they're capable of, this could be another blowout win for the Roughnecks.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Show up. Definitely, you can never take anybody for granted, but you show up, you play your game after winning against the Rush 13-6, winning against the Mammoth 13-9. Continue with that same just consistency against the Warriors, and you're seeing yourself to win number 7 on the season. So, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today and having an opportunity to talk with us about the Roughnecks after sweeping the weekend. It's an exciting time to be in Calgary for sure. And excited to see how they're continuing to impress. I've been saying they're a top 5 team in the league for sure. And this past weekend, in my opinion, helped solidify them as a top team in the West as well as in the league.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, and come back anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, you are always welcome here on Daily Dive. Guys, the good luck charm of the Daily Dive guests continue, whether it's players or analysts, those that join us on the show, their teams go on to do great things. Ryan's been on the show a couple of times, and look at the Roughnecks sitting at number 2 in the West and absolutely a top 5 team across the NLL. So Ryan Ballantine, Roughnecks analyst. We've got one more segment to get into. It's time for our last brew of the show. So coming up, we've got our 3 stars of the weekend, and we will touch a little bit more on the week's attendance, including some of those numbers we just saw in Calgary. More to come here on Daily Dive. Welcome back to Daily Dive. It's time for our last brew, presented by B-Res Coffee Company. As we get into our final segment of the day here on Daily Dive, I'm Renee Washington, joined back by producer Mike. We were just talking about the Roughnecks sweeping the weekend with analyst Ryan Ballantine joining the show, as well as been recapping some of the results from this past weekend. Well, it's time for us to finally share our 3 stars, players that had a standout game, and some of these should be no surprise to you guys if you've been paying attention so far this show, because 2 of them are players that are between the pipes. Steve Orleman of the Riptide with his 55 save performance in New York's win over Albany earns our 1st star. And keeping with the goaltender theme, Christian Del Bianco of the Roughnecks. As Ryan was talking about, offensively, 13 goals in both games. They've been 6-1 on the season. Whenever they have scored 11 goals or more, they have 13 apiece in this past weekend. And a big reason they win that is Christian Del Bianco only allowed 15 goals, 6 against the Rush, 9 against the Mammoth in their 2 games as they swept the weekend. 3rd star goes to Callum Crawford. We mentioned him because of how he's no longer with the Riptide and has now been just putting up 5 goals, having a breakout performance week after week. 5 goals, 2 of them in just 25 seconds during the 4th as Panther City was able to open up the game and knock off Vancouver, who still remains with just 1 win on the season. So our 3 stars of the weekend, Steve, Christian, Callum. Producer Mike, which of these do you think was most important and pivotal in their team's victory? They each helped their team win some very good games, close games, doubleheaders. But which one do you think of all the 3 stars shined brightest?
One guy outshined Jeff Teets. I don't think outshined him. He still played pretty well. Another guy is Callum Crawford. The 3rd guy played in front of nearly 26,000 fans and allowed 15 goals and 89 saves. I think that's what you call not bad. They're peppering him, and he's throwing the pepper right back at him. That's impressive. CDB, wow. That's very impressive against 2 very good teams, by the way. Mammoth and Rush they're not like great right now, but they're you lay down and you're gonna get destroyed. And they showed up and showed out. So shout out Christian Del Bianco.
Yeah, I think Christian Del Bianco was shining bright like a diamond. But look.
Ooh, references.
But look, honestly, as you mentioned, it's kind of like in dodgeball. I love dodgeball. I know we talked about it on the show before. When somebody throws the ball at you and you catch it and they're out, it's like joke's on you. That was Christian Del Bianco. They're like, we're gonna keep shooting. 89, shots coming your way. Well, more than 89, I should say. And he's like, I've got this. Save. So 89 saves, only allowed 15 goals. You do that math. He's faced over 100 shots between the 2 days and saved 89 of them. And as you talk about, 2 teams that have 4 wins on the season, the Rush and the Mammoth, aside from the Mammoth being defending champs, also 2 teams that have been in the conversation as being top in the NLL. So you're not doing that against a winless Georgia Swarm or a 1-win Vancouver team. You're doing it against 2 of the top teams in the West, and it's very convincing. So I would like to think Christian Del Bianco may have shined brightest this past weekend. But we did mention also attendance. Now, the Calgary Roughnecks in their 2-game home and home, around 26,000 between both games. Friday night, as Ryan was talking about in our last segment, they did also have a really genius marketing plan of encouraging fans that are season ticket holders of other Calgary teams to be able to come and attend. Love it when you can cross over sports and bring fan bases from each sport out to support the other. But then also we've seen across the league some not so good attendance. Panther City, the only thing aside from possibly needing to be named the Dallas Pest, as we talk about, maybe a name change, is also an attendance change. Not doing so great. They're just around that 3,600 mark on attendance in Week 11. New York Riptide, also not phenomenal. You have 3 teams under 5,500, Rochester, New York, and Panther City for this past weekend. And for Rochester, it's possibly the most surprising because they are a winning team. Where are your fans? Mike, where are their fans?
I'm looking for you here. So I have a question because I want to ask people in the Dallas like a serious, honest mirror question right now. Okay, I am your mirror right now, basically, Dallas people. What are you watching this past weekend? Because it ain't the Cowboys. What were you not on Sunday? What were you watching on Saturday? I want to know because they had better. Okay, so the Riptide stink. I get it. Rochester hasn't lost 2 games. Georgia keeps on telling us that Lyle Thompson's selling 8,500 of those 8,544 tickets, but I still do not believe. But who is promoting these games in Dallas, man? Should they change their name to Dallas Panthers or Dallas Pest? I don't know where. Like, do they not know they have a lacrosse team? That's what I'm wondering. There's no way this team is winning in their second year. So they've only got the first year under their belt. What's going on, man? Come on, fans. It's a good sport. Ask Vegas.
Well, to answer your question, where have you been? I'm going to keep with my Rihanna theme here. Right. I don't know if they were too busy watching. I had to double check to make sure I had my days right. But if they were busy watching Luka and Kyrie losing overtime to the Kings Saturday night, don't know, but either way, there's a great lacrosse team that you have right there that you can
with good rookies and a guy who's got 1,000 points in his career. Who cares, right?
Who cares? Yeah, who cares?
Let's watch Kyrie because he might not even show up to the game, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the biggest surprise are definitely Panther City and Rochester because Rochester is a top team. Georgia Swarm actually had more in attendance than Rochester, so Lyle Thompson is single-handedly not only carrying the team on the field, but apparently in ticket sales too. And Rochester has to get that figured out because you have significantly less people attending your games, and you actually have wins this season. So what is your excuse for people not to be attending?
That Georgia thing just I love Charlie B, who's their PA guy over there. Lyle Thompson's fantastic, but they need to sell him a team because if these are the numbers and this is what they're doing, they're 0-6. He needs to just they don't need to sell him, they need to give him the team. How about that? Because he's making all the money.
The Georgia Lyle Thompson, just let him have it. Oh, man, attendance. Well, there's always some encouraging bright spots about attendance and then some that are not so great. So we will continue to follow. That was the Week 11 attendance with Calgary, head and shoulders above everyone. They more than doubled. I mean, in one game alone of their two, they had significantly more than everybody else pretty much added up. You could say this weekend they had more in their two games than everybody else added up, if I do the math really quickly.
Yes, 21 to 26, yeah.
Yep, I'm correct. So interesting. Things that make you go, Another moment on Daily Dive that we are questioning things. But look, we had some fantastic games in Week 11. We've got more coming up the rest of this week as we prepare for 12. Some more fantastic guests coming your way. Some more NLL discussions. That was an edition of Daily Dive. I hope you guys have a fantastic Valentine's Day. Enjoy Love Day. It's loving yourself, loving your family, loving friends, loving significant others. Spoken like a true single person on Valentine's Day, right? Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in to Daily Dive. We'll be back here for more 12 p.m. Eastern Time each and every day, bringing you the latest and the greatest breaking news, trades, fantastic, tremendous guests, and much more here with producer Mike and myself, Renee Washington. We'll see you back for more on Daily Dive.